Hello, today Voice of America's Armenian service is conducting an interview with a scholar from Turkey, Ümit Kurt, who is a PhD candidate in history at Clark University and is currently teaching at the Sabancı University in Istanbul. Ümit is connecting with us from Aintab, from his hometown, from Turkey. Hello, Ümit, thank you for agreeing to speak with us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Ümit, your research is concentrated on the early 20th century Armenian properties under the Ottoman Empire and how basically the properties were confiscated. Could you elaborate a little bit about the specifics and what are the main outcomes that you would like to talk about?
Basically, I'm gonna focus on how the regulations, laws, and all the rules and status of the CUP, Union and Progress Party period and the Republican period were applied to the local levels, and that's the reason why I'm gonna conducting a research on Aintab, my hometown. I'm looking for how Armenian properties and Armenian movable and immovable properties were taken, changed hands and taken over by the local Sunni Muslim population or the provincial elites in the city of Aintab. And actually, aftermath of the deportation of the Armenians in 1915, and actually during the deportation, first and foremost, Union and Progress Party, they made certain rules and regulations in order to so-called administer and to control and supervise the so-called abandoned properties of deported Armenians. Actually, they promulgated those laws and regulations in order to confiscate and in order to pillage and taken over these properties by stealing these properties from the hands of Armenians, and they distributed those properties to the Muslim refugees coming from Balkan and the Caucasus regions. And these laws and regulations, which were introduced by the Union and Progress Party, were also heralded by the Turkish Republican period, and Republican elites and Republican political elites and Kemalist elites inherited those laws and regulations. They also made new revisions and they introduced new laws in order to carry on this development of pillaging and controlling and supervising Armenian properties, and they also made many Muslim local provincial elites affluent and rich as a result of this confiscation process.
From the findings that you have so far, can you say this was a centralized process that was coming from Istanbul back in the day, or the central government, or was this also a chaotic process decentralized in the regions?
As a matter of fact, central authority and the central political elites at Istanbul, at Constantinople, they play a pivotal role, a key role in terms of introducing, in terms of promulgating, in terms of preparing those laws and regulations. But in the case of application and carrying out those laws, of course, the local authorities, local interlocutors of the Union and Progress Party and the Republican elites and the Turkish Republic, they also played a huge role, actually, in terms of seizuring and in terms of pillaging those properties. Of course, central authorities, they were aiming at, they were seeking for having the whole control of the properties of Armenians, but actually they didn't make it in a successful way, because at the local levels there were many corruptions, there were many pillaging events and so on and so forth. At the local levels, especially the local authorities of the Union and Progress Party and Turkish Republic, and especially Sunni Muslim local elites and provincial notables, they negatively affected this process, and they became very rich as a result of this confiscation process.
Now, Go ahead.
So we have to look at what took place, what happened in certain local areas during the deportation and the whole annihilation of Armenians. And of course, Armenian genocide is a ramification of physical annihilation of Armenians, but actually as an important side effect of Armenian genocide, controlling, seizuring, and confiscating and pillaging of movable and immovable properties of Armenians was a direct result and structural effect and ramification of Armenian genocide. This point has to be taken into consideration in order to understand and unfold the main and major dynamics and elements of Armenian genocide.
The scholarship on and about the Armenian genocide is probably one of the most studied, or let's say the Armenian genocide itself is one of the most studied subjects among the scholars of the 20th and nowadays the 21st century. And oftentimes one of the obstacles that many mention, both the Armenian scholars and the non-Armenian scholars, is the work with the archives, the archival material of the late Ottoman and then early Republic in Turkey. Now, you are dealing with this specific period of time, and you probably, in order to be able to research the laws and the regulations, you need to access the archives. Do you or did you have any issues with this, and how were you able to overcome, if so?
To be honest with you, I have an issue in terms of being able to reach out certain documents, certain telegrams, certain actually archival materials, which actually demonstrates and indicate how property confiscation process was, carried out, was executed. And I have an issue in terms of being able to enter into the land registry cadastral archives, the title deeds office, actually. And because one of the fundamental aspect of my dissertation is going to be to prove or to indicate that who acquired, who obtained, or who stole Armenian properties, and which properties went to whom. In order to understand, or in order to explicate this process, we need to get into the archives of title deeds, the land registry cadastral archives. These archives, the title deeds archives, is essentially important, is very significant in terms of explaining and in terms of demonstrating how Armenian properties were changed hands. And I have an issue in terms of being able to get into these archives. And also, there were general secretaries of Union and Progress Party during the deportation and genocide, especially between 1915 and 1918. These general secretaries of the Union and Progress Party, they were usually the representatives of Union and Progress Party at the local level. For instance, Union and Progress Party had a general secretary in Diyarbakir, in Diklanagar, in Ayintap, in Harput, in Sasun. And these general secretaries were main authorities and responsible for administering and taking registration of Armenian properties. And they took daily notes, and they also, noted the amount of the properties, the ownership of the properties, and so on and so forth. Every single detail related to movable and immovable properties of deported Armenians, and they kept these notes. And these notes were composed of 35 or 36, notebooks, because Union and Progress Party used to have approximately 35 or 36 general secretaries at the local levels in Anatolia. But now, even though we are 100% sure that these notebooks of the general secretaries of the Union and Progress Party are available, but of course we are not able to we are not able to conduct a research on these notebooks because physically they are not available, according to the Prime Minister authorities of the Prime Minister Archives in Istanbul. But actually, as a matter of fact, these notebooks are available. But as a researcher, I am not authorized to, to be able to reach these sources.
Yeah, this similar situation happened before with other Armenian scholars, especially from Gomidas Institute and others who were trying to access specific documents in Istanbul and elsewhere in Turkey.
Exactly. Specific documents, they are sorting out and specific documents which, according to their mindset, is a hazardous or is a harmful, kind of document to the so-called national security or national sovereignty of the Turkish Republic. That's the reason why they first and foremost pick and sort out those documents, specific documents, certain documents, and then they just conceal those documents from the researchers.
The issue of properties is actually being discussed in Turkey currently as well. Armenians still own certain properties. The Armenian church actually is the only official owner, basically, of any kind of properties. What is the situation with the, if I mean, I know it may not be your specific scope of research as a historian, you're concentrating on at a different time, but do you have or do you follow any of these developments specifically? I mean, we do know about these several big issues that have been widely discussed both in Turkish and other media about the Armenian Catholic Church's property outside of Istanbul and other issues that we face today. And if so, could you elaborate on that?
Actually, it's a widely discussed topic. It's highly discussed in Turkey. What you are saying is fairly accurate, therefore. Now, property issue is a burning issue, actually. And especially after matter of publication of our book, the topic has started to become a topical one and a catchy issue. And people just started to recognize this aspect of Armenian genocide. And especially Armenian people in diaspora. I don't want to denote Armenian people with this kind of label, but let's say diaspora in Europe and the United States. Now they are actually they are trying to open a lawsuit in Turkey, within the boundary of Turkey. They are trying to open a lawsuit in the Turkish tribunals, And actually, it's a very important development. It's a very good development, and it's a very clever way, a smart way, actually, to push, to pressurize on Turkey, And I think Armenian people who are trying to get their properties back or who are trying to claim their properties back should open a lawsuit within the boundary of Turkey and in the Turkish tribunals. Mm-hmm. And this property issue, as I said before, it's a very highly discussed issue, and actually, state officials in Turkey now are trying to push this issue aside, and that's the reason why our book, for instance, has not been discussed in the mainstream newspapers and magazines and journals in Turkey. It was on purpose, it has been on purpose. But liberal Democrat environments and liberal Democrat and some leftist milieu in Turkey, they are very interested in the book and the confiscation and property issue, and this book is basically arguing that why Turkish denialist policy is very strong is actually relying on this property issue, this confiscation issue, because we are talking about a huge amount of a great deal of property which were confiscated, which were stolen, and which were taken over by Muslim refugees. They were confiscated and utilized by authorities of Union and Progress Party and the Republican elites and so on and so forth. Now people has started to question this aspect of genocide, and Armenian people in Europe and the United States, they are now seeking for getting their properties back. In doing so, they are opening a lawsuit in Turkey in the Turkish tribunals.
So in other words, you're saying that the threat that the Turkish state feels and basically continues the denialist policy is because of these property issues. That's the argument.
Actually, this is my hunch, because you know what, people, especially in Europe or in the United States, and Armenian people, I'm talking about Armenian community, Armenian population, they shouldn't see denial. They shouldn't see why Turkey. Why they shouldn't see that denialism or denialist policy only belongs to the state. No, actually, why denialist policy is so strong in Turkey, why the Turkish state is always supporting this denialist policy. They are, revising it. They are, making a lot of investment in Europe and in different parts of the United States in order to, carry out this denialist policy, because the Turkish society gives huge support and high consent to this denialist policy of the Turkish state. That's the reason why denialism, Turkish denialism of Armenian genocide and not recognized Armenian genocide is actually related not only state denialist policy and the support of the society towards this denialist policy. And why Turkish society is supporting this policy? Because of the property issue, because the richness of many Turkish bourgeois, bourgeois classes and many Turkish businessmen, and especially the provincial elites at the local levels, and their origin of richness emanated from Armenian properties. Since they know that, they are hugely supporting the denialist policy of the Turkish state.
I mean, properties is one issue. Of course, territorial threats are maybe another issue. But you mentioned the fact that a lot of the mainstream magazines and newspapers basically censored or tried not to publish what you were doing. Do you feel threatened at all as a scholar doing this kind of work in Turkey?
Frankly speaking, I haven't encountered any kind of menacing or threatening behavior towards me yet. I don't feel threatened. I have been in Turkey for 3 months, more than 3 months. I can teach in Turkish university, Sabancı University. Of course, Sabancı University has a liberal vision. That's the reason why they enable me to teach there. And now I have been working in the Prime Ministry archives in Istanbul for a long while, and I haven't encountered any kind of pejorative or negative behavior towards me. So I don't feel threatened, and I haven't come up with any kind of threatening behavior towards me yet. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not gonna feel threatened. Up until now, I can work comfortably.
The current administration in Turkey, let's say if we look a decade back, this would be much more difficult to do, both for a scholar from Turkey and from outside. And we've been objectively seeing some opening in Turkey, both in this may be a result of technologies or maybe the society is going in a different direction. Many, though, are trying, because of many, Armenians and others who want to do field research in Turkey, do archival and other types of works in scholarly work in Turkey, have been talking about, well, this may be a very short opening, and let's try to collect as much information as we can, because who knows what can happen in that country. Do you feel that there is some sustainability in this change in Turkey? Or do you also have the fear that things can close up again at some point?
Actually, I'm not very optimistic on that, because this kind of development may have seemed to be very short opening. I'm inclined to consider this development as such, and that's the reason why I have some doubts about the sustainability of these positive developments, of these gradual developments, because of the democratic deficit in Turkey. And we have still many gaps in our democratic consolidation in terms of Kurdish issue, even though the current government in power, AKP, Justice and Development Party, they are now negotiating with the PKK in order to resolve this Kurdish issue, but I can't see any concrete, steps in order to resolve and disentangle this issue. And these kind of undemocratic acts and undemocratic developments and undemocratic deeds of the current governing party in power make me actually feel not comfortable in terms of believing these positive developments in a sustainable manner. That's the reason why I have some doubts on it, but there is also a new wave of new wave of scholars and new wave of freedom of expressions, freedom of thought, and new wave of liberal movements in Turkey. We shouldn't just, oversee it. We shouldn't just ignore that kind of development as well. Many liberal Democrats and many also, Democrats, intellectuals and scholars, they are trying to, they are trying to make new studies, and they are trying to put the Armenian genocide into agenda of Turkey, and they are trying to change something in order to develop Turkish democracy, in order to strengthen the consolidation of Turkish democracy. We should support this wave in Turkey. We should support those scholars, those liberal and democratic intellectuals and scholars. And this, if we support this kind of development in Turkey, that will also make pressure on the government, and that will make the government actually democratize their own policies and systems as well.
Mr. Kurt, thank you very much.
That's the only way to provide sustainability of democracy and democratic developments in Turkey. And of course, if the Kurdish issue would be resolved in Turkey, this kind of democratic development would directly affect, the issue of Armenian genocide in Turkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurt. Thank you for your time. Good luck with your research, and we hope to speak with you soon again.